The chandeliers in the Venetian Grand Poker Room cast a golden glow over the velvet-lined tables, illuminating the faces of the city's wealthiest gamblers. The air buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the low murmur of high-stakes bets being placed. It was the kind of place where money wasn't just spent, it was flaunted. At the heart of the spectacle, Ethan Carter leaned back in his chair, a smirk plastered across his chiseled face. Dressed in a designer suit worth more than most people's mortgages, he toyed with a stack of $5,000 chips, like they were pocket change. Ethan had it all: money, power, and an ego big enough to fill the entire casino. He thrived on these nights, not just because of the millions he could win, but because of the people he could humiliate. He didn't just play poker, he dominated it. That's why. When a young, nervous-looking man pulled up a chair to his table, Ethan's smirk deepened. The guy looked completely out of place. Baggy hoodie, faded jeans, sneakers that had seen better days. The casino's neon lights reflected in his slightly wide, uncertain eyes as he fumbled with his buy-in, his fingers shaking slightly as he pushed forward a modest $10,000 stack. A joke compared to the six-figure fortunes sitting in front of the other players. Ethan let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "You sure you're in the right place, kid?" he asked, loud enough for the surrounding players to hear. A few of them chuckled, already entertained by what they assumed was about to be an easy slaughter. The young man cleared his throat. Yeah, I've always wanted to try a real poker game," he said with an awkward laugh, shifting in his chair. His voice was hesitant, lacking the confidence of someone who knew what they were doing. Ethan grinned like a predator that had just spotted its next meal. "That's so? Well, welcome to the big leagues, buddy." He leaned forward, tapping his neatly stacked chips. "Just a heads up, we don't play for fun here. This isn't some home game with your buddies. This is where real money is made. You sure you want to risk that little allowance of yours?" The other players snickered. The dealer merely raised an eyebrow but said nothing as he shuffled the deck. The young man, Daniel, gave a sheepish nod, his face tinged with embarrassment. "I mean, I'm not great, but I'll try my best." Ethan let out a mock gasp, placing a hand on his chest. "Oh no, fellas, did you hear that? He's going to try his best." The table erupted in laughter, and Ethan threw a wink to one of the cocktail waitresses. "This is going to be fun." As the cards were dealt, Ethan barely looked at his own hand. His focus was entirely on breaking the so-called beginner in front of him. What he didn't realize, the game he thought he was playing wasn't the real one at all. The first few hands played out exactly as Ethan expected. Daniel fumbled with his chips, hesitated too long before calling, and occasionally glanced at the dealer as if unsure what to do next. Classic rookie behavior. Ethan took every opportunity to mock him. "Careful there, kid." Ethan grinned after Daniel hesitated on a bet. "Might want to check a YouTube tutorial before your next move." The other players chuckled. The cocktail waitress serving them smirked as she refilled Ethan's drink. Daniel laughed awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, guess I'm still getting the hang of it." Ethan rolled his eyes, already bored. This wasn't even a challenge. Within 5 rounds, Daniel had already lost nearly half of his buy-in. The table was feeding off his money, and Ethan was having the time of his life watching the so-called beginner fall apart. But then something odd happened. Daniel started winning. At first, it seemed like pure luck. He'd go all in with a weak hand, and somehow the river card would miraculously save him. A risky bluff would get called, only for Ethan to realize he had misread the kid entirely. Each time Ethan grew more annoyed. The other players at the table started noticing too. One guy, an older businessman in a tailored navy suit, raised an eyebrow after Daniel won yet another unlikely hand. Huh, beginner's luck, I guess. Yeah, Ethan muttered, jaw tightening. Lucky bastard. But it didn't stop. Daniel kept winning, and with every win he grew less hesitant. His fidgeting stopped. His glances at the dealer became less frequent. By the time he doubled his stack, Ethan's amusement had vanished. Now it was personal. Ethan wasn't just a millionaire, he was a winner. He never let rookies, especially clueless, hoodie-wearing nobodies, walk away from his table with money. So he did what any egotistical, overly confident player would do. He raised the stakes. "All right, kid," Ethan said, leaning forward with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Enough of these baby bets. Let's see if you're really cut out for the big leagues." He slid forward a stack of black $10,000 chips. "All in." The table went silent. Daniel's fingers hovered over his chips, hesitation flickering in his eyes. He glanced around, as if unsure. Then, slowly, he nodded. Yeah, okay, I call." Ethan smirked. This was it. The cards flipped. Ethan had 2 aces, the best possible starting hand in Texas Hold'em. The perfect trap. Daniel turned his over. A 7 and a 2, the absolute worst possible hand. The table erupted in laughter. "Jesus, kid," one player chuckled, shaking his head. "You really are new at this." Ethan threw his head back in a laugh, his frustration melting into pure satisfaction. This was too easy. "Good effort, bud," Ethan sneered, taking a sip of his drink. "But maybe leave the high-stakes games to the pros." Then the dealer dealt the flop, the first 3 community cards. 7, 2, 7, full house. The laughter at the table stopped. Ethan's grin froze. Daniel had just crushed him. A small, sheepish smile played on Daniel's lips as he shrugged. "Oh, wow. I guess that's pretty lucky, huh?" Ethan couldn't believe it. He had just lost 6 figures to the worst hand in poker. And somehow, that wasn't even the worst part. The game continued, but now Ethan was playing emotionally. He started chasing every bet, refusing to let Daniel get the better of him. The losses piled up. His perfectly stacked chips became a messy pile. Daniel, on the other hand, remained calm. The nervous, unsure rookie from before, gone. Something shifted. His posture, his confidence, the way he moved his chips almost too precisely. Then came the final hand. Ethan's stack had dwindled. He wasn't out yet, but he needed a big win, though the cards were dealt. Daniel checked his hand and glanced at Ethan. Then he smiled. It wasn't sheepish this time, and it was knowing. "I'll go all in," Daniel said casually, pushing everything forward. Ethan's blood boiled. This little nobody, this so-called beginner, was trying to outplay him. "Call." The cards flipped. Ethan had a king-high flush. Daniel, a full house, the best possible hand. Ethan's heart stopped. The room exploded in gasps and murmurs. Daniel had just cleaned him out. For the first time all night, Ethan was speechless. And that's when he heard it, a slow clap from the bar. He turned. A tall, older man in a dark suit stood there, arms crossed, smirking. "Well, well," the man chuckled. "Guess the Phantom still has it." Ethan's stomach dropped. The Phantom. A name whispered in underground poker circles. A player so legendary that even pros feared him. Ethan turned back to Daniel, realization slamming into him. The hoodie, the awkwardness, the nervous stammering. It was all an act. Daniel smirked, finally dropping the clueless act. "Nice game, Ethan," he said, stacking his chips neatly. Ethan felt sick. He had just been hustled by one of the greatest poker players to ever live. And worse, everyone saw it happen. The room buzzed with whispers and stifled laughter. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the mountain of chips that once belonged to him, now neatly stacked in front of Daniel. His hands clenched into fists, his mind scrambling for an explanation. This wasn't possible. This nobody, this so-called beginner, had just wiped him out in front of everyone, and then Daniel spoke. "Man," he sighed, stretching casually as if he hadn't just demolished one of the most arrogant high rollers in Vegas. "Guess I just got lucky, huh?" The table erupted in laughter. Ethan's face burned as the realization sank in. The fake stammering, the hesitation, the nervous glances at the dealer. It had all been an act. Daniel had played him from the very first hand. The phantom had returned. The older man who had called him by that name walked over, chuckling. "You haven't lost your touch, kid," he said, clapping Daniel on the back. "I had a feeling I'd find you back at the tables." Daniel smiled, finally dropping the clueless persona. "Just stretching my legs, Carl. It's been a while." Carl Benson. Ethan's stomach dropped even further. Benson wasn't just some casino regular. He was a poker legend, one of the few players to have won the World Series of Poker multiple times. If he was here, watching Daniel, that meant this wasn't just some fluke. This was calculated. Ethan hadn't lost to a lucky beginner. He had walked into a trap, and his ego had made him fall for it. He pushed back from the table, shoving his chair out of the way. "You—" He jabbed a finger at Daniel. "You scammed me. You acted like an idiot just to make me underestimate you." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Scammed? Nah, I just let you believe what you wanted to believe." He leaned forward, his smirk widening. "Maybe next time, don't judge a player by his hoodie." The laughter grew louder. Ethan's jaw tightened, his entire body radiating humiliation. This wasn't just about losing money anymore. He had been destroyed, and the whole room witnessed it. Someone from the bar called out, "Hey, Ethan, maybe try a beginner's table next time." Ethan's face burned. Without another word, he stormed away, his once confident stride now rigid with anger. As he reached the exit, he heard one last humiliating sound, another slow clap. Turning, he saw Daniel standing, tossing a single $100 chip in the air. "Here," Daniel said, flicking it toward him. Ethan instinctively caught it. "A tip," Daniel added with a grin. "For the entertainment." The room howled with laughter as Ethan shoved the chip into his pocket and disappeared into the Vegas night. Daniel turned back to the table, gathering his winnings, and with a satisfied sigh, signaled the dealer for another game. Tonight had been fun, but he was just getting started.